Hi everyone, and welcome to the mid-semester break. At the start of this semester, I did a reflection video in week 1, week 2, and week 3, and then another one in weeks 4 to 6, just to capture some of the experiences that I was having as a university lecturer. What I found was it was really hard to keep up a vlogging habit every single week of my teaching. In fact, a common theme of a lot of the videos was how tired I was getting because of all the work I had to do and how much I was constantly running out of time to do all the things I wanted to get done. My plan for following those videos up was always to do a semester recap, which is what this vlog is today, and then I'm going to follow that up with a formal reflection video so that I can model for my pre-service teachers the kinds of things that you would say when you're moving from just reporting your experience to really engaging in professional reflection. So what's the difference between those words, reporting and reflecting? Well, there's actually more R words than that. And there is a 4 R's model of reflection that I'm drawing on here. I use this model because it was the one that was presented to me when I first started working here at the university. And if you've got a different one that you use, I'd love to hear about it in the comments, because although the 4 R's of reflection provides a really excellent framework for scaffolding your reflection, I know there's got to be other ways of doing it. So hit me with them if you know them. In the 4 R model, there are 4 different levels of reflection, and the first one is where you are just reporting and responding to your practice, which is really what I was doing in my vlogs. It was just me reporting what was happening on the day-to-day or the week-to-week and capturing my initial responses to those events and ideas. The other 3 levels though, relating, reasoning, and reconstructing, all have to be brought in as well if you want to do what Ryan and Ryan have called the full professional reflection. So the second stage of reflecting is relating, and in the relating stage you make some connections between what you experienced and your prior experiences. You ask yourself questions like, have I seen this before? And were the conditions then the same or different to now? So in this vlog I want to do a little bit more of that relating work before I move on to the other 2 stages. That final vlog that has those last 2 stages, the stages of reasoning and reconstructing, that's where I get to do some more thinking around how I reason through the challenges or the opportunities I faced. Maybe I connect that to some theoretical knowledge that I've got. And then in reconstructing, that's when I ask myself questions about what I could do next time. So in terms of relating, something that I have seen before is that tiredness of teachers. And for me as a lecturer, I am still a teacher, just a university teacher, and I do still suffer from that same emotional fatigue and just tiredness that comes about with the cycles of the job. So when it's a really intense time during term or semester, that has an increased workload for all teachers, and it means that they're all very stressed out. So whether that's primary, secondary, early childhood, TAFE, university, all teachers are subject to those rhythms of their sector, and when it peaks, it peaks. But that's not a new story. I'll still try and think about what theory I can find to attach to that in my final vlog. But some other things that I found this time around that I would like to relate to. One of the things that I talked about, which I have seen before, are the ways that lectures or any kind of teacher talk actually involve different kinds of intentions or purposes, different kinds of genres. So sometimes when you're doing teacher talk, you're doing it because you want to explain something, you want to give some information. But sometimes when you're doing teacher talk, it's because you're trying to be a bit more persuasive. You are actually trying to get students to believe your point of view or come around to your way of thinking. And then sometimes when you're doing teacher talk, it's not to explain or to argue necessarily, but sometimes you're telling a story. You've got something personal or an experience that you want to share. So a thing that really came up for me during the semester was the differences in how we construct teacher talk, whether it's in a lecture scenario or in a smaller workshop scenario. I found that I was thinking constantly that semester about how different types of teacher talk require different approaches to preparation and also different approaches to delivery. I find this really relatable train of thought because something that comes up over and over again in my line of work is this idea of, or this question of, how often a teacher should be doing explicit instruction, how often there should be a teacher up the front talking to the students, and for that one-way direction of communication, or at least that teacher-led direction of communication to be the way that the classroom is operating. And some people kind of argue that, less is more. You should get rid of as much teacher talk as you can and shift things to being more around hands-on student-led activities. I just don't think the binary of teacher-led and student-led is that helpful, and I'm finding it more interesting and more useful to think about what it is the teacher talk is trying to achieve and use that to make decisions around how long the talk should go for and how interactive it should be. I know in one of my vlogs, I talked about how I had to match my expectations for the teaching to the learning spaces I was presented. And so here you do have often different teaching spaces every semester and different teaching spaces for different classes. I know this can be true for school teachers as well. I remember when I was school teaching, it was such an aspiration to get yourself a homeroom, you know, and teachers who'd been there for a longer amount of time were usually the ones with an established homeroom, like they'd earned the right to have a homeroom. But I never stayed at a school for a really long time, and so I tended to be in that category of new-ish teacher that could be moved around from room to room, which is okay too. It does make you a whole lot more adaptable, I guess. But I am curious about the attachments that we form to the environments that we're in and how much the environment can play a part in building up the culture of a student community or a classroom community. So the fact that the few weeks at the start of every semester is spent with me almost trying to get my bearings and work out how to work in an entirely new room all over again, I do wonder if I could be using that time better or setting up the classes better if I was in, if not a homeroom, at least just a room I was familiar with over and over again. As I was going back over the vlogs, another thing I noticed was that I did have a lot of love for my fourth years. And I think that's because, well, for starters, I was often vlogging on a Monday morning, which was when I was going to my fourth year class. So when I had the time to vlog and I had that moment at the start of the week, that's where I was going. But I have only just for the past 2 years been teaching fourth years in this degree. It's a 4-year bachelor degree, and usually I have students in second year or third year, sometimes first year. And I hadn't realised how much getting a fourth year unit was like getting to teach year 12s. It's not totally the same because it's not as though you're having to prep fourth years for a high stakes end of year exam. Like, that's not the same. But that sense that you get with your year 12s where they're almost adults and almost out of school, they can taste their freedom and, you know, their attitude changes and they just start to become a little bit more real. That happens with fourth years as well, or maybe students in all final semesters or final years of programs that are 4 or 5 years long. So it was interesting. I found out, because we've had a degree restructure here, that in the new structure, I'm unlikely to get fourth year units. So I had that taste of fourth years that's now been taken away. In terms of that being taken away from me, I just wanted to interrogate that language for a moment. Some of the academic work that I've started to do is in the area of teacher agency. And when I think about how much agency I have as a university teacher, how much room I've got to make choices and to design my own approach to curriculum, or what I was close to having, I suppose, was being able to have a vision for what students accomplished across multiple years of a degree and being able to see them at the start of that process and the end of that process. I'd gotten up to a point where I could have some say about which parts of that process I was involved in and which units I would take versus what units someone else would take and what would go into those units. Anyway, I'm interested in thinking about the theoretical implications of that and what that could mean for me and for other teachers like me who have things that they like to do, but then sometimes those things are taken away. The last thing I want to talk about in this vlog is something that came up in a few of the other reporting vlogs, and that is the pressure to get stuff up onto an LMS, a learning management system, or to get stuff out there, resources for students to access in a timely way to do their learning. And it occurred to me when I was thinking back to what it was like to be a school teacher that I don't think there was that much pressure to have everything up on the LMS before students started a term. And I know things have changed in schools. People tell me that schools have changed at a similar pace to what universities have. And so for me, even being out of it for 7 years, things have changed. Expectations have changed. However, here at uni, when students arrive at O Week and they open their Blackboard or whatever kind of learning management system they've got, they're in theory supposed to be able to see everything that's coming up. All of the assignment sheets, all of the marking criteria rubrics, all of the allocated readings that are coming up for every week or fortnight or whether the section you've got designated there. And ideally, all of the learning experiences as well, so that they can work ahead or work offline if they've got a week at home. At school, there is just a lot more flexibility to be able to say, that bit hasn't been created yet, or that bit will be created after I've assessed the students to see what they need, or I'm still tinkering with that and so it will come out at an appropriate time. I know that on one hand, that's a good thing. If I was a student, that's what I would want. When I do online learning in a MOOC or something like that and I log in, that's what I expect to see. But as a practitioner, having to get everything ready for a week before I've even met my students and worked out what their needs and interests are is full on. Creation of digital resources is full on. The amount of time that it takes to prepare materials for a teaching video versus the amount of time that it takes to prepare materials for the same amount of teaching done live in a classroom is astronomically bigger. It takes more time to create this digital stuff. And so to have to create all of that digital stuff before you've even met the humans, that's a huge difference, I would say, between the two sectors. Anyway, those are the big things that I wanted to relate to, and there will be more coming in the follow-up vlog in terms of me following this up with some theory and completing my reflection. Thanks for hanging around and look forward to seeing you there.